$500? That's it? You gave my cousin $10,000 last
Jenny,
month.
it's your birthday gift. I thought you'd appreciate
Appreciate? This is insulting. You're worth millions and you give me pocket change?
I gave what I thought was appropriate. Your cousin needed help with medical
bills. I don't
bills.
care what she needs. I'm your niece too. This is favoritism and it's disgusting.
Voice. We're in a restaurant. People are staring.
Good, let them...
The restaurant security camera captured everything in devastating detail. The birthday dinner was supposed to be a celebration, the gift that sparked an entitled meltdown, and the moment when a 67-year-old retired businessman decided he'd had enough of his niece's greed and disrespect. Richard Morrison had built a successful commercial real estate empire over 40 years, accumulating a net worth of nearly $15 million. He had no children of his own, and his estate was planned to be divided among his nieces and nephews. Jenny Morrison, his 32-year-old niece, stood to inherit approximately $2.4 million. She knew it, and she'd been treating her uncle like a personal ATM for years, expecting lavish gifts and constant financial support because of what she believed she was owed. But on the night of January 15th at an upscale steakhouse in downtown Chicago, Jenny made the biggest mistake of her life. She humiliated her uncle in public over a birthday gift. She called him cheap. She compared her gift to her cousin's. She made a scene that went viral and destroyed any goodwill he had left for her. Within 3 weeks, Richard would revise his entire will. Within 6 months, Jenny would be completely cut off. And within a year, the legal battle would expose a pattern of financial exploitation that would shock the entire family. Before we dive deeper into this absolutely shocking story, I need you to do something. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. Your country, your state, wherever you are. And if you believe in holding entitled people accountable when they show their true colors, hit that subscribe button. Richard Morrison had always been generous with his family. Over the years, he'd helped pay for college tuitions, down payments on houses, medical emergencies, and various crises. He never expected repayment. Family was family, but he'd started to notice a pattern with his niece Jenny. Every gift was met with disappointment if it wasn't large enough. Every gesture was compared to what others received. Every act of generosity was treated as an obligation rather than a kindness. Richard's other nieces and nephews expressed gratitude. They sent thank you notes. They appreciated his help. Jenny sent text messages asking when the next check would arrive. For Jenny's 32nd birthday, Richard had chosen to give her $500 in cash along with a nice card. It wasn't nothing, but it also wasn't extravagant. He wanted to see how she'd react. He'd invited her to dinner at one of Chicago's finest steakhouses, Morton's, where he'd reserved a private corner table. Jenny arrived 15 minutes late, barely apologized, and immediately started talking about a luxury handbag she wanted to buy. Richard listened politely, ordered appetizers, and made conversation about her job and life. Twist. When Richard handed Jenny the birthday card with $500 inside, her face went from anticipation to shock to visible anger in about 3 seconds, and she actually threw the card down on the table. Richard watched his niece's face transform. He'd expected some disappointment, maybe a forced smile, but not this level of visible disgust. "Is this a joke?" Jenny asked, her voice sharp. "It's your birthday gift," Richard said calmly. $500 and a card. "I hope you..." $500? That's it? Jenny interrupted. "Uncle Richard, I know you gave Melissa $10,000 last month." Richard's jaw tightened. Melissa needed help with emergency surgery that her insurance didn't cover. That was a specific situation. "So what? I'm less important than Melissa? You're playing favorites. This is insulting. Jenny, you're being inappropriate. We're in a public restaurant. I don't care if we're in the middle of Times Square. This is ridiculous. You have millions of dollars, and you give me $500 like I'm some homeless person on the street." Richard felt the eyes of other diners turning toward their table. The restaurant manager glanced over with concern. "Jenny, if you don't lower your voice and show some respect, this dinner is over." "Respect?" Jenny laughed bitterly. "Do you want respect? Try respecting me enough to give me a real gift. This is pathetic." The restaurant manager approached the table to see if everything was all right, and Jenny loudly told him that her cheap uncle had ruined her birthday, causing heads to turn throughout the entire dining room. Richard felt humiliation wash over him as the manager stood awkwardly beside their table, unsure how to handle the situation. Everything's fine, Richard said quietly to the manager. We're just having a family discussion that got heated. We'll keep it down. The manager nodded and walked away. But the damage was done. Half the restaurant had witnessed the outburst. Richard looked at Jenny, who was still fuming, her arms crossed, her face red with anger. You're embarrassing yourself, Richard said. No, you're embarrassing me, Jenny shot back. Do you know how it feels to be treated like you're not valued? Like you're less important than everyone else? I have valued you, Richard said, his voice low and controlled. I've helped you countless times over the years. I paid for half your college tuition when your parents couldn't afford it. I gave you $5,000 when your car broke down. I've taken you on family vacations. I've included you in everything. And this is how you show gratitude? Jenny scoffed. That was years ago. What have you done for me lately? Lately? I gave you $2,000 6 months ago for your apartment deposit. That wasn't enough either, because I needed $3,000 and you only gave me $2,000. Richard pulled out his phone and opened his banking app, showing Jenny a list of transfers to her over the past 3 years totaling $47,000, asking her if she remembered any of it or ever said thank you. Jenny stared at the phone screen showing the list of transfers. $47,000 over 3 years. She'd never added it up. She'd never thought about it as a cumulative amount. She'd just taken each gift as it came and immediately started thinking about the next one. So what? Jenny said defensively. You have millions. $47,000 is nothing to you. Richard put his phone away. You're missing the point entirely. The amount doesn't matter. What matters is that you've never once expressed genuine gratitude. You've never acknowledged that I don't owe you anything. Every dollar I've given you is a choice, not an obligation. I'm your niece. I'm family. The family doesn't keep score. You're right, Richard said. The family doesn't keep score. But families also don't treat each other like ATM machines. Family shows respect and appreciation. You've shown neither. Jenny's anger was reaching a boiling point. She'd come to this dinner, expecting a generous birthday gift, maybe a check for several $1,000s. Instead, she got a lecture and $500. Fine, Jenny shouted. If that's how you feel, then keep your money. I don't need anything from you. She grabbed the car with the $500, tore it in half, and threw it at Richard. As Jenny tore up the cash-in card, Richard calmly picked up the pieces, placed them in his pocket, and said 6 words that would change everything. You'll regret this, I promise you. The silence that followed Richard's statement was heavy and uncomfortable. Jenny suddenly realized she might have gone too far, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. What's that supposed to mean? Jenny asked, her voice still defiant but with a hint of uncertainty. It means exactly what it sounds like. Richard said calmly, You've shown me who you really are tonight, and I'm going to act accordingly. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you. This relationship, whatever it was, is now over. You've made it very clear that you only value me for my money. So, there's no reason for us to continue pretending we have a relationship. Richard stood up, placed $300 on the table to cover the dinner neither of them had eaten, and walked toward the exit. Jenny sat there stunned, watching her uncle leave. Other diners were still watching, whispering among themselves. The manager approached again. Ma'am, would you like us to bring your meal, or would you prefer to leave? I'll leave, Jenny said quietly, suddenly feeling the weight of what had just happened. She gathered her purse and walked out. As Jenny left the restaurant, she didn't know that 3 different people had recorded parts of her outbursts on their phones, and one of them would post it to social media that same night. The video appeared on Twitter at 11:47 p.m. Someone had recorded Jenny's rant about the cheap uncle and insulting $500 gift. The caption read, Entitled woman has meltdown at Morton's because her rich uncle only gave her $500 for her birthday. Some people have zero shame. By morning, the video had 500,000 views. By afternoon, it had 2 million. By the next day, it was everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, Reddit, Facebook. Everyone was talking about the ungrateful niece who'd humiliated her generous uncle. The comments were brutal. People called Jenny entitled, spoiled, greedy, and worse. They praised the uncle for walking out. They shared their own stories of ungrateful family members. Jenny's full name wasn't in the original video, but internet sleuths figured it out within 24 hours. They found her social media profiles, her workplace, everything. Her Instagram, which had been public and full of photos of luxury purchases and expensive vacations, became a target. People flooded her posts with comments about hypocrisy and entitlement. Jenny made everything worse by responding defensively. She posted a long statement claiming the video lacked context, that her uncle had been treating her poorly for years, and that she deserved better treatment as a family. Jenny's defensive post included details about her uncle's wealth and her expected inheritance, which legal experts immediately pointed out could be used against her if her uncle decided to change his will. Richard saw the viral video 3 days after the dinner. His attorney, David Chun, had called to inform him that his family dispute had become a national conversation. "David, I had no idea anyone was recording," Richard said. "What does this mean legally?" "It means Jenny has created a public record of her expectations regarding your estate," David replied. "She's essentially admitted she views you as a source of money rather than family. That gives us strong grounds if you want to make changes to your will." "I do want to make changes," Richard said. "I've been thinking about it since that dinner. I don't want someone who sees me as a paycheck to inherit anything from me." David scheduled a meeting for the following week to discuss options. In the meantime, Richard started documenting everything. He pulled bank records showing every gift he'd given Jenny over the years. He saved a viral video and all of Jenny's social media responses. He compiled a file of text messages where Jenny had asked for money, often with no please or thank you. The pattern was undeniable. Over 8 years, Richard had given Jenny over $100,000 in various gifts and financial assistance, and he couldn't find a single genuine expression of gratitude. While reviewing old emails, Richard discovered that Jenny had been telling her friends and boyfriend for over a year that she was set for life because her uncle was worth millions and had no kids, essentially counting his money before he was even dead. The emails Richard found were damning. Jenny had forwarded an article about her uncle's successful real estate sale to her boyfriend with the message, "Uncle Richard just made another $2 million. My inheritance keeps growing. We'll be set when he finally kicks it." Another email to a friend discussed buying a luxury condo once she got her inheritance. She'd been spending money she didn't have yet, making plans based on wealth she hadn't earned, and treating Richard's eventual death as a financial windfall. Richard felt sick reading these emails. He'd loved his niece. He'd watched her grow up. He'd celebrated her achievements and supported her through difficulties. And this entire time, she'd been viewing him as a future paycheck. The meeting with David Chun was productive. Richard explained what he wanted. "I'm not cutting her off to be vindictive," Richard said. "I'm cutting her off because she's shown that our relationship is purely transactional to her. I'd rather leave my money to people who value me as a person, not a bank account." David outlined the options. Richard could reduce Jenny's inheritance to a token amount, like $1, which would make clear it wasn't an oversight. Or he could cut her out entirely and redistribute her share among other family members and charities. David revealed that under Illinois law, Richard didn't need to explain or justify his decision, and Jenny would have almost no legal grounds to challenge the will unless she could prove undue influence or lack of mental capacity, which would be nearly impossible given Richard's age and sharp mind. Richard decided to reduce Jenny's inheritance to exactly $500, the same amount she'd torn up and thrown at him in the restaurant. The symbolism was perfect. The new will redistributed Jenny's original $2.4 million share among Richard's other nieces and nephews, his favorite charities, and a scholarship fund for underprivileged students pursuing business degrees. The will was drafted, reviewed, signed, and witnessed properly. It was legally airtight. David advised Richard to inform Jenny about the change in person, with a witness present, to ensure there was no confusion later. Richard agreed. He invited Jenny to meet him at David's office, telling her it was important family business. Jenny arrived at the law office a week later, clearly hoping this was about receiving money or perhaps an apology. She'd been lying low since the viral video, avoiding social media and hoping it would blow over. Richard and David were waiting in a conference room. "Jenny, thank you for coming. Richard said formally. Please sit down. Jenny sat, looking between Richard and the attorney with growing confusion. What's this about? Jenny, this is my attorney, David Chun. I've asked you here because I've made changes to my estate planning, and I wanted you to hear about them directly from me. Okay? Jenny said slowly. Richard slid a copy of the new will across the table, opened to the page showing Jenny's inheritance. $500, with note stating the exact amount she deemed insufficient and disrespectful at her birthday dinner. Jenny stared at the document in disbelief. $500? This is a joke, right? No joke, Richard said. You made your feelings very clear about what you think of my generosity and what you believe you're entitled to. So, I've adjusted my will accordingly. You can't do this. Jenny shouted. Standing up? I'm family. You can't cut me out. I can, and I have, Richard replied calmly. Illinois law is very clear. I have the right to distribute my estate however I choose. But this isn't fair. What about everything you promised me? I never promised you anything, Richard said firmly. You assumed, you expected it. But I never made any guarantees about your inheritance. Jenny turned to the attorney. This is because of that stupid video. People took out of context. I was having a bad day. The video showed your true character, David said professionally. But more importantly, Mr. Morrison has documented a pattern of entitlement and disrespect spanning several years. The dinner was simply the final incident. Jenny's face was red with anger and panic. She'd been counting on that inheritance. She'd made plans. She'd told people. Uncle Richard, please, I'm sorry about the dinner. I was stressed. I didn't mean those things. Richard pulled out a folder containing printouts of Jenny's emails about waiting for him to kick it so she could get her inheritance, sliding them across the table without a word. Jenny's face went pale as she recognized her own words. Those emails, I can explain. There's nothing to explain, Richard said. You've been viewing me as a future paycheck for years. You've told your friends and your boyfriend that you're set for life because I'm going to die and leave you money. That's who you are. Those were private emails. You had no right to read those. I had every right when you were discussing MY money and MY death, Richard said, his voice rising for the first time. Do you understand how that feels? To know your niece is literally waiting for you to die so she can spend your money? I didn't mean it like that. Then how did you mean it? Because it seems pretty clear to me. You've never cared about our relationship. You've only cared about what you could get from me. Jenny sat back down, realizing the gravity of the situation. What can I do to fix this? Can I apologize? Can we start over? Richard shook his head. It's too late. The will is signed. My decision is final. Jenny, you need to understand something. I've given you over $100,000 over the years. Most people would be grateful for that. You treated it like it was nothing, like you were entitled to more. Always more. David informed Jenny that if she attempted to challenge the will, Richard had prepared a detailed memorandum explaining his reasons, along with all the documented evidence, which would become public record in probate court, exposing her behavior to the entire family and anyone else who cared to look. The threat of public exposure was devastating. If Jenny challenged the will, everyone would see the emails, the documented requests for money, the viral video, everything. Her entire family would know how she'd been talking about Richard's death as a financial opportunity. But I'll have nothing, Jenny said desperately. That's not true, David corrected. You have your own income, your own life, your own opportunities. You'll have exactly what you've earned yourself, nothing more and nothing less. But my cousins are getting millions because they've maintained respectful relationships with their uncle, David said. They've shown gratitude. They've treated him like family, not like a bank. Jenny looked at Richard with tears forming. Uncle Richard, please. I made a mistake. Don't I deserve a second chance? You've had countless chances, Richard said quietly. Every time I gave you money and you didn't say thank you, that was a chance to show gratitude. Every time you asked for more without acknowledging what you'd already received, that was a chance to show appreciation. You failed every single one of those chances. The meeting ended shortly after. Jenny left the office in tears, realizing she destroyed a relationship and a fortune over her own greed and entitlement. As Jenny was leaving the building, she ran into her cousin Melissa, the one who'd received $10,000 for medical bills, who was there to thank Richard in person for another small gift and had no idea about the inheritance drama. The encounter with Melissa in the lobby was painful. Melissa saw Jenny's tear-streaked face and immediately showed concern. "Jenny, are you okay? What happened?" Jenny couldn't speak. She just shook her head and rushed past Melissa to the elevator. Melissa went upstairs to Richard's meeting with David, confused about what she'd just witnessed. "Uncle Richard, I just saw Jenny in the lobby. She looked really upset. Is everything all right?" Richard decided to be honest. "Melissa, you'll find out eventually. I've changed my will. Jenny is no longer receiving a substantial inheritance. She's been cut down to a token amount." Melissa's eyes widened. "Oh my God, because of the restaurant incident?" "That and many other things," Richard said. "But I don't want to discuss Jenny. I asked you here because I wanted to personally give you this." He handed Melissa an envelope. Inside was a check for $3,000 with a note. "For your continued medical expenses and recovery. Wishing you good health." Melissa's eyes filled with tears. "Uncle Richard, this is too much. You already helped me so much. You've always been grateful and kind," Richard said. "That matters to me. Families should support each other, but it should go both ways. Respect, appreciation, and genuine care." Melissa revealed that Jenny had actually called her 2 weeks ago, asking her to lie and say she didn't receive $10,000 from Richard, trying to gather evidence of favoritism for a potential legal case. Richard was shocked but not surprised. Jenny had been planning to build a case against him? Melissa nodded. "She called me and said she felt like you were treating her unfairly. She wanted me to say you'd never helped me, or that you'd give me much less than you actually did. She said she was gathering evidence of unequal treatment." "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth. Melissa said that you helped me with medical bills I couldn't afford, that I was incredibly grateful, and that I wouldn't lie for her or anyone else." "I'm glad you stood firm," Richard said. "That's character." David made a note of this conversation. Jenny's attempt to manipulate other family members into supporting a false narrative would be additional evidence if she challenged the will. Over the following weeks, Jenny tried multiple times to contact Richard. Phone calls that went to voicemail, text messages that went unanswered, even a letter delivered to his home. Richard didn't respond to any of it. He'd made his decision, and he was at peace with it. Meanwhile, the viral video continued to circulate. Jenny had deleted all her social media accounts, but the damage was done. Her employer, a marketing firm, had seen the video. While they couldn't fire her for her personal behavior, the negative attention had become a problem. Jenny's employer called her in for a meeting to discuss the reputational concerns and offer her a choice: resign voluntarily with neutral reference, or stay and risk being let go during the next restructuring. Jenny chose to resign. The humiliation was too much. Her co-workers had seen the video. Clients had seen it. She couldn't walk into a meeting without wondering if people were judging her as the entitled niece who threw money at her uncle. Without her job and without her expected inheritance, Jenny's financial situation became precarious quickly. She'd been living beyond her means for years, expecting the inheritance to eventually bail her out. Now reality hit hard. Credit card debt, car payments, rent on an apartment she couldn't afford. She'd built a lifestyle based on money she'd never actually had. Jenny tried to reach out to other family members for help. Most had seen the video. Most had heard about the change will. Most were sympathetic to Richard, not to her. Her parents were disappointed in her behavior and refused to enable her entitlement by giving her money. Her cousins, who stood to inherit more now that Jenny was cut out, kept their distance. For the first time in her adult life, Jenny had to face consequences without someone rescuing her. 6 months after the restaurant incident, Jenny filed a legal challenge to Richard's will, claiming undue influence and questioning his mental capacity. It was a desperate move that her attorney had advised against, but Jenny was determined. The court scheduled a competency hearing, where Richard would be evaluated by independent doctors, and where all of Richard's documentation of Jenny's behavior will become part of the public court record, including the emails about waiting for him to die. The competency hearing was devastating for Jenny's case. 3 independent doctors evaluated Richard, and all concluded he was of sound mind, sharp memory, and clear judgment. His attorney presented a timeline of Jenny's behavior, the documented gifts totaling over $100,000, the lack of gratitude, the viral video, and the damning emails. The judge reviewed everything carefully. Ms. Morrison, the judge said, "I've examined all the evidence presented. Your uncle is clearly competent to make his own decisions about his estate. Furthermore, the evidence shows a pattern of behavior on your part that would justify his decision regardless of the viral video incident. But Your Honor," Jenny's attorney began, "he's showing favoritism among his nieces and nephews." "That's his right," the judge said firmly. "He can leave his money to anyone he chooses. He can leave it all to charity if he wants. He can leave it to his dog. The law allows testators broad discretion in estate planning. Unless you can prove he lacks mental capacity, which you clearly cannot, this will stand." The judge dismissed the challenge and awarded attorney fees to Richard, meaning Jenny had to pay for both her lawyer and his. The total cost, $47,000, the exact amount Richard had given her over the previous 3 years. As they left the courthouse, a reporter who'd been following the viral video niece story approached Jenny for comment, and she made everything worse by claiming her uncle was heartless and vindictive, creating another news cycle. The media coverage of the court case reignited interest in Jenny's story. Articles appear with headlines like "Ungrateful Niece Loses Inheritance Battle" and "Court Rules Rich Uncle Can Cut Off Entitled Relative." Jenny's attorney fees quote, calling Richard heartless, was picked up by dozens of outlets. Comment sections were brutal. People had no sympathy for Jenny. They saw her as a cautionary tale about entitlement and greed. Jenny's job prospects dried up. Every employer who Googled her name found the viral video and the court case. No one wanted to hire someone with that kind of public reputation for entitlement and poor judgment. Jenny was forced to move out of her expensive apartment into a much cheaper one. She sold her car and started using public transportation. She cut up credit cards and started living on a strict budget. For the first time in her adult life, she understood what financial struggle felt like. Meanwhile, Richard was thriving. He'd redirected Jenny's inheritance to causes he cared about. The scholarship fund he'd established had already helped 5 students afford college. His other nieces and nephews, grateful for their increased inheritances, had strengthened their relationships with him. 1 year after the restaurant incident, Jenny sent Richard a handwritten letter, not asking for money or forgiveness, but genuinely apologizing and explaining how the experience had forced her to completely reevaluate her values and her life. Richard read Jenny's letter with surprise. It wasn't what he'd expected. There were no excuses, no justifications, no requests, just a genuine apology and an acknowledgement of how badly she behaved. The letter explained how Jenny had been forced to confront her entitlement, how losing everything had been painful but necessary, how she'd started therapy to address her issues with money and self-worth, how she'd gotten a modest job and was slowly rebuilding her life on her own terms. She ended the letter by saying she didn't expect forgiveness or a restored relationship, but she wanted Richard to know that his decision to cut her off, as painful as it was, might have been the best thing that ever happened to her. Richard was moved by the letter, but skeptical. He'd been disappointed too many times. He showed the letter to David, his attorney. "What do you think?" Richard asked. "I think people can change," David said carefully. "But change takes time to prove itself. If she's genuine, you'll see it in her actions over months and years, not in a single letter." Richard decided not to respond immediately. If Jenny's change was real, it would reveal itself over time. 6 months later, Melissa called Richard to tell him that Jenny had been volunteering at a financial literacy nonprofit, teaching low-income individuals how to budget and avoid debt, using her own story as a cautionary example. Richard was intrigued by Melissa's report. He decided to see for himself. He attended one of Jenny's financial literacy workshops anonymously, sitting in the back of the room. Jenny was teaching a class of about 20 people, mostly young adults, about the dangers of living beyond your means and the importance of gratitude for what you have. She told her story without excuses. She talked about expecting an inheritance and building a lifestyle around money she hadn't earned. She talked about the viral video and the humiliation. She talked about losing her job, her apartment, her financial security. And she talked about how it forced her to grow up and take responsibility for her own life. The class was engaged. People asked questions. Jenny answered honestly, even when it was embarrassing. After the class, Richard approached her. Jenny looked shocked to see him. "Uncle Richard, I didn't know you were here. I wanted to see if your change was real," Richard said quietly. "I think it might be." Jenny's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry for everything. I know sorry doesn't fix what I did, but I mean it." "I know," Richard said, "and I appreciate the letter you sent. I've been watching from a distance. Melissa keeps me updated." Richard didn't restore Jenny's inheritance that day, but he did something more important. He invited her to coffee the following week to talk. Not about money, about rebuilding their relationship as people, not as uncle and potential beneficiary. Over the next year, they slowly repaired their connection. Richard saw a genuine change in Jenny. She'd gotten engaged to a teacher who earned a modest salary and shared her new values. She built a career helping others avoid the mistakes she'd made. She lived simply and seemed genuinely happier. 2 years after the restaurant incident, Richard updated his will one final time. He restored a portion of Jenny's inheritance, not to the original $2.4 million, but a $500,000, with a note explaining that the amount reflected both her past mistakes and her genuine efforts to change. The will stipulated that the money would be held in trust until Richard's death and could only be used for specific purposes: education, home purchase, or charitable giving, not luxury purchases or lifestyle inflation. When Richard eventually passed away 5 years later, surrounded by family who genuinely loved him, Jenny inherited her $500,000 trust. She used it to fund the scholarship program Richard had started, ensuring his legacy of helping others would continue. Thanks for watching the story all the way through. If this showed you the importance of gratitude, humility, and the possibility of genuine change, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. We bring you stories that show both accountability for entitled behavior and the possibility of redemption when people truly change. Drop a comment. What was the most powerful moment in this story? Do you think Jenny deserved a second chance? Have you ever had to deal with an entitled family member? Your voice matters. See you in the next one.